Snow fell like static across the ruined plain, hissing against metal and cloth as if the planet itself disapproved of the silence. Sergeant Elias Rook lay behind a half-buried emplacement, gloved hands resting on the cold receiver of the M88 heavy machine gun. Its steel frame was scarred, paint long burned away, but the weapon felt familiar, almost comforting beneath his fingers. Around him, a handful of human soldiers waited without speaking, breath fogging the air, eyes fixed forward. Across the ice field, the aliens advanced with theatrical confidence. Their armored vehicles hovered inches above the ground, humming softly, shields shimmering like translucent skin. At their center strode an officer taller than any human, posture rigid, movements precise. His armor gleamed despite the snow, lines of alien script glowing faintly along his chest and helm. He stopped well within firing range, as if distance itself were irrelevant. The officer raised one gauntlet hand, and the hum of his forces quieted. His voice carried easily through external speakers, smooth and disdainful. He addressed the humans as one might address stubborn animals, remarking on the futility of resistance and the inefficiency of outdated tactics. His gaze lingered on the machine gun emplacement, sensors flickering as they assessed exposed ammunition belts and manual feed mechanisms. Rook felt the familiar heat of anger rise, then forced it down. The M88 had been old when his grandfather trained on its predecessors. It kicked hard, overheated fast, and demanded respect. It also worked in sandstorms, vacuum-adjacent cold, and electromagnetic hellscapes where smarter weapons died quietly. Rook had trusted it with his life before, and it had never betrayed him. The alien officer laughed, a clipped sound full of superiority. He gestured openly toward the gun, describing it as primitive mass propulsion, obsolete in an era of precision energy warfare. He spoke of shields calibrated to dissolve such threats, of wars won without recoil or waste. Each word was deliberate, designed to humiliate, to erode the human's resolve before a shot was fired. Private Cade shifted beside Rook, knuckles white around his rifle. Rook caught the movement and gave a subtle shake of his head. Orders were orders. Hold. Observe. Let the enemy talk. The officers seemed to mistake their stillness for fear, stepping closer, boots crunching softly on ice. His confidence thickened the air more than the cold ever could. Rook adjusted his cheek against the stock, aligning his eye with the iron sights. He did not look at the officer's face anymore, only at the center mass of that gleaming armor. The machine gun felt heavier now, loaded with intention. Somewhere behind him, a commander waited for the right moment, weighing consequences measured in lives and seconds. The alien officer stopped again, close enough that Rook could see frost forming along the edges of his shield. With exaggerated politeness, he issued a challenge, inviting the humans to demonstrate the worth of their relic. His tone suggested amusement, certainty, inevitability. Rook inhaled slowly, the world narrowing to breath, metal, and waiting. His finger rested against the trigger, unmoving, as the silence stretched thin enough to break. Beyond the ridge, alien artillery repositioned with lazy confidence, unaware that history was about to argue. Rook did not think about glory or survival. He thought only of function, of simple truths hammered into him by years of service. When the signal came, the machine would speak. And when it did, the galaxy would learn why humans never retired what still worked. The lesson would begin with one sound, loud, crude, and impossible to ignore forever by anyone listening closely. When the signal came, it was not spoken aloud. It passed through a subtle hand motion from the commander, a fraction of a second of permission that carried the weight of finality. Rook felt it more than saw it. His finger tightened, not in haste, but with practiced certainty, and the M88 answered like a waking beast. The first round detonated the silence. Recoil slammed into Rook's shoulder, a familiar, brutal shove that anchored him to the earth. The muzzle flash bloomed bright against the storm, briefly painting the snow gold. The gun roared, not with elegance, but with authority, every vibration traveling through bone and memory. Brass casings spilled out in a glittering arc, vanishing into the drifts. Across the field, the alien officer's confident posture faltered. His shield reacted a heartbeat too late, flaring as sensors scrambled to reinterpret the threat. The projectile struck with obscene force, a dense slug of accelerated mass that did not care about predictions or doctrine. Energy rippled outward as the shield absorbed, resisted, and then screamed under the strain. The impact hurled the officer backward, his body skidding across the ice as if swatted by a god's hand. Armor alarms flared red across his visor, systems recalculating probabilities that had never included this outcome. Pain registered as data first, then sensation, sharp and disorienting. Around him, alien troops froze, disbelief fracturing their formation. Rook released the trigger after the burst, smoke curling from the barrel. His breath came steady, controlled. The gun ticked as metal expanded, heat meeting cold in protest. He did not cheer. He watched. Years of training had burned one lesson deep: confirm effect. The officer lay motionless for a moment, shield flickering erratically like a dying star. A sound escaped the alien speakers, not laughter this time, but something strained and confused. He pushed himself upright with visible effort, one knee grinding into the ice. The shield finally collapsed with a sharp crackle, dissolving into nothing. For the first time since landing on this world, he looked at the humans without certainty. Rook met that gaze through iron sights. He felt no hatred, only a grim sense of inevitability. The M-88 was not sophisticated. It did not think or adapt. It simply delivered force, honestly and repeatedly, until something broke. The officer raised a trembling hand, not in surrender, but in dawning comprehension. Around them, the battlefield held its breath. Alien vehicles hesitated, targeting systems stuttering as new variables flooded their networks. Human soldiers shifted behind cover, morale lifting with the smoke. Rook adjusted his grip and leaned into the weapon again, ready to speak a language the enemy finally understood. The first sentence had been delivered. The conversation was far from over. He steadied the barrel despite the heat, muscles burning, mind calm. Across the ice, the alien officer straightened fully, pride visibly cracked but not destroyed. Orders barked in sharp tones, formations beginning to move with less certainty than before. Rook sensed the shift immediately. This was no longer a demonstration. It was the opening exchange of a lesson written in recoil and blood. He squeezed again, ready to finish the thought, knowing the enemy would not forget the sound that shattered their assumptions. The machine gun roared anew, and the frozen plane answered, echoing the promise of sustained defiance as snow and fire mingled, drawing every eye toward the human's line and daring the invaders to test, again and again, whether their future truly outweighed humanity's past. The lesson had only begun, and no one present could claim ignorance afterward when the war remembered them. The alien officer staggered, forcing his systems to prioritize balance over pride. Damage reports cascaded across his visor, each line contradicting years of doctrine that promised immunity from crude kinetics. He tasted fear for the first time, sharp and humiliating, and buried it beneath command protocols drilled into him since hatchling cycles. He barked orders, voice clipped and urgent, directing his troops to spread and advance. Hover units repositioned, shields flaring brighter as they compensated for unexpected stress. Infantry weapons snapped up, elegant barrels glowing as they sought targets along the ridge. The battlefield awakened, no longer a stage for mockery, but a proving ground. Rook responded without waiting for praise or instruction. He fired in controlled bursts, letting the machine gun breathe between snarls of violence. Each burst was deliberate, walking impacts across shields, vehicles, and pack formations. The M-88 shook like it always had, rattling bones and resolve alike, demanding strength and offering certainty in return. Alien shields flared, dimmed, and flared again, algorithms struggling to reconcile mass and momentum. One transport lurched as rounds chewed through its field, forcing an emergency ascent that exposed its underside. Another shield failed entirely, collapsing in a flash that sent troops scrambling for cover they had never believed necessary. The alien officer watched cohesion fray despite superior numbers and technology. Human fire lacked refinement, but carried relentless intent, exploiting physics his people had dismissed as obsolete. He realized, with chilling clarity, that humanity had not failed to advance. They had simply refused to forget what violence truly was. Rook changed the barrel with practiced speed, gloved hands moving despite the heat. Sweat froze at his temples as adrenaline steadied his nerves. Around him, other human weapons joined the chorus, rifles cracking, launchers thumping, every sound grounded and brutally physical. They were not elegant, but they were present, undeniable. The officer's voice softened, stripped of theatrical contempt. He ordered tactical withdrawal and recalibration, acknowledging resistance that warranted respect. The word tasted bitter even as it steadied his forces. This enemy did not fight to impress. They fought to endure. Rook tracked retreating silhouettes through drifting smoke, finger easing from the trigger. He knew this was not victory, only recognition. The machine gun steamed quietly, its work unfinished but proven. Across the ice, alien forces regrouped with newfound caution, and Rook understood the truth settling between them. Humanity's lesson was landing, one round at a time, and the next chapter would demand even more. He stayed behind the sights, aware of the weight of what had shifted. The alien officer was no longer a caricature of arrogance, but a thinking adversary, dangerous precisely because he learned. That realization tightened Rook's jaw more than any insult ever could. Wars were lost not when enemies underestimated you, but when they finally understood you. Across the line, humans exchanged brief looks, unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. They had been measured and found unexpectedly lethal. The snow continued to fall, indifferent to strategy or pride, settling on spent casings and scorched ice alike. Rook rested his cheek against the stock once more, listening to the cooling metal creak softly. He knew the aliens would return with adaptations and fury. He also knew the M88 would be waiting, faithful as gravity, ready to remind the invaders that understanding humans did not make them safe from humans. The battlefield had spoken, and both sides listened, knowing silence would never again mean ignorance. Only the pause before harsher truths arrived with thunder. That pause belonged to humanity, and it was never surrendered lightly. Not now, not ever again. By anyone. Snow whipped across the ruined plain, hissing against twisted metal and shattered hulls of alien craft. The sky was a bruised canvas of dusk and smoke, the last remnants of the battle that had ended in uneasy silence. Sergeant Cole Winters crouched beside the heavy machine gun, its long barrel resting atop a mound of sandbags glazed in frost. He could still feel the vibration of its last burst echoing through his gloves. Steam coiled from the weapon's muzzle, like a satisfied sigh. Around him, the human outpost stood battered but defiant. The flag on the comms tower hung torn, yet it still moved with the wind, a stubborn gesture of life in a place meant for none. The alien delegation arrived under the pale light of artificial moons, their sleek transport cutting through the storm like a blade through silk. Cole had seen their kind before, tall, silver-skinned, with eyes like lenses, their bodies covered in ceremonial armor that shimmered faintly. They called themselves the Virile. Their leader, Commander Thress, disembarked with mechanical grace, a faint hum resonating with each step. He didn't bow. No one expected him to. The treaty demanded cooperation, not respect. Thress's voice, filtered through an interpreter drone, carried a tone of academic amusement. Your species still uses projectile-based weaponry. His mandibles clicked once, a sound that might have been laughter. Crude combustion and kinetic force. How quaint. The soldiers near Cole stiffened, but he remained silent. Words wouldn't matter here. only demonstration did. The Virile had been sent to evaluate humanity's readiness for integrated defense against the approaching void incursions. They'd promised technology, training, and guidance. But what they hadn't expected was resistance to their arrogance. Cole knew at the moment Thress's gaze lingered on the machine gun, as though examining an artifact from a forgotten age. This model, Thress said, pointing a clawed finger toward the weapon, is obsolete. It is not a weapon, it is nostalgia. Against the void, it would be less effective than silence. He turned to his aides, speaking in their sharp, staccato language. Laughter rippled like metallic rain. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd buried men beside that gun. It wasn't nostalgia, it was legacy. When the demonstration began, the aliens displayed their precision drones, sleek, luminous machines firing plasma bolts that carved precise craters into the snow. Each strike was elegant, almost artistic. Thress looked to Cole expectantly, as though daring him to match such performance. Cole gave no speech, no preamble. He simply swung the heavy machine gun into position, his breath fogging the scope, his gloved hands locking the tripod in place. He squeezed the trigger. The world exploded in thunder. A roaring, chugging fury of brass casings and fire tore through the stillness, the gun spitting flame into the dark like the wrath of forgotten gods. The recoil shook his bones. Snow leapt from the ground in sprays, and the targets, dense alloy barriers, disintegrated under relentless impact. The rhythmic roar filled the frozen valley, drowning even the whine of alien machinery. When the belt ran dry, silence returned. Only the soft tinkling of falling casings broke the still air. Cole exhaled slowly, the breath of a man who had let the machine speak for him. The barrel glowed faintly, heat shimmering in the cold. Thress stood motionless, his expression unreadable behind his mirrored eyes. Then, quietly, almost reverently, he said, "Human brought a monster." Cole didn't respond. The phrase hung there, suspended in the frozen air, heavier than any weapon. For the first time since their arrival, the Virile officers didn't mock. They watched. They calculated. The storm thickened again, snow swirling around the two soldiers of very different worlds. Between them lay an understanding neither could articulate. Humanity's weapon wasn't just metal and fire, it was will. And in that moment, Cole knew the evaluation had changed.